Welcome. In today's video, we're going to look at how you can install Calico on third-party CNIs. Now, when people think about Calico, they tend to think about Calico as a container network interface, rightfully so. Calico is mainly known for its CNI. However, the policy function is distinct from CNI and can be installed on a number of supported third-party CNIs. So in this video today, we're going to look at how you can install Calico in an AKS cluster with Azure CNI so that you get to leverage Calico's observability as well as advanced network policy features. So let's get into it. In this video, you should have a link to the Git repo. I'm going to go through each of the steps in my terminal here. So first of all, we're going to start by creating a resource group in AKS. We're going to call this Calico OSS, Calico open source. So let me go ahead and do that. Now, once the resource group is created, we can then create the AKS cluster in that resource group. Now, this AKS cluster is going to be called Calico Whisker, and we're going to have Azure CNI for this cluster. Now, notice that I've not specified a policy option. The default policy option is none, and that's because we'll be installing Calico for policy on this AKS cluster. So let's go ahead and create this cluster. All right, so the cluster creation is now complete. Let me just clear my terminal and let's get the credentials for this cluster. All right, I'm just going to overwrite the previous credentials I had for this cluster. And if I do a kubectl get pods -a, you can see that, this cluster just came up about a couple of minutes ago. Okay. All right, so now we have our AKS cluster up and running. Let's next look at the network profile of this cluster. So remember that we did not install a policy add-on for this cluster. It was not specified in our AKS cluster configuration. And the network plugin for this cluster is Azure CNI. Now, if you have a cluster that has a policy add-on, AKS or Azure has steps to migrate that cluster to network policy none. And once it's migrated, you can then install Calico for policy over it. Okay. All right. So next up, let's look at the Calico policy install. So at the Helm repo, I already have the Helm repo added in my environment. Let me do a Helm repo update. All right, and once done, I can go about installing Calico via the Helm install. Now, for this Helm install, I have specified a Helm values file. So let's look at the values file. Now, this file specifies a Kubernetes provider of AKS, and this is what informs the operator not to deploy the CNI component and only deploy the policy component of Calico. So in this cluster, the CNI will continue to be the Azure CNI, the default CNI of the cluster. All right, so that's the only value specified in the Helm. This is a relatively simple installation. So let me go ahead and perform the Helm install. All right, the Helm install was complete. Let's confirm that the Tigera operator pod is up and running. Now the operator pod will provision the rest of the Calico components. Let's do a watch on the Tigera status to make sure the components are successfully coming up. Okay, so after about a minute, we can see that all components were successfully deployed. So next, what I'm going to do is deploy a sample application so that when we bring up the Calico Whisker UI, we can see logs for this sample application. Let's confirm that all app pods were successfully deployed. Yeah, we can see that all the pods at this point are running. And now that Calico has been successfully deployed, we can create a port forward to Calico Whisker, which is a service in the Calico system namespace. You could expose this service using either a load balancer or an ingress as well. But for this demo, I'm going to create a port forward. Now, with that port forward in place, we can open a browser window and navigate to localhost on port 8081 to access Calico Whisker. So in a browser window, if I go to localhost 8081, this is the Calico Whisker UI. And for example, if I click on the source namespace dropdown, I can select the Yao Bank namespace to look at flow logs from workloads in the Yao Bank namespace. Now, Calico Whisker also has a REST API. So for example, let's say I'm interested in looking at logs for the past 60 seconds. I could curl the Whisker API to retrieve those flow logs in JSON format. And you can then pass this through some sort of JSON processor to slice and dice the log to analyze it further. Okay. All right, so that's it for this video. As you can see, the steps to install Calico on a cluster with a third-party CNI is pretty straightforward. I hope you find this useful and try it out, and let us know if you have any feedback. I'll leave a link to Calico open source documentation as well on this video. Thanks for watching.